Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavansha
Krishna Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Paramsika Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Sri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Gauranga. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Sarasate Deve Gauravani Pacharane Vishesha Sunyavati Chachate Satarane Om Gyan Timarandasya Ranjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militum Jainam Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpa Krutyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhiyacha Patitanam I'm glad to be here. You may be seeing a little more of me. One of the GBCs for this place. Come around some. Looks like we had a little sunshine. I want to talk this afternoon about Srila Prabhupada, my spiritual master, and the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. One way to get an appreciation for Srila Prabhupada and what he has done, I found, is from studying very carefully a talk that Prabhupada gave. I'm talking about very early on in the movement. This is in 1968. So not very many years in America. And here, this is Prabhupada is in Los Angeles. And he's observing the disappearance day of his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And in the course of talking about his spiritual master, Prabhupada begins to tell how it was that he came to the West. How he got this order to do so by his spiritual master, and then he takes in this lecture he gives the same order that he received to his own disciples. So it's very interesting that way, and in a way it's about how to be successful in spiritual life. So he's talking about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj. He said he underwent very severe penances for starting this movement, worldwide movement. That was his mission. Bhaktivinoda Thakur wanted to do this. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was the father of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. It was Bhaktivinoda Thakur that really got the inspiration that we should spread the Krishna consciousness all over the world. Actually, that idea goes way back to Lord Chaitanya, who said that one day his names would be chanted in every town and village of the world. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur actually first tried to spread Krishna consciousness outside of India, and Prabhupada said in 1896, Bhaktivinoda Thakur wanted to introduce this Krishna consciousness movement by sending this book, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Life and Precepts. He did that. Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote a little pamphlet in English, a short book about Lord Chaitanya, and then mailed it out to Oxford University Library and McGill University in Canada. All over the world he mailed this book out. That was in 1896. Fortunately, that was the year of my birth year. So Prabhupada was born in 1896. And Prabhupada says, and by Krishna's arrangement, we came in contact. I was born in a different family. My Guru Maharaj was born in a different family. So he's talking about how he came into contact with his spiritual master, the son of Bhaktivedanta Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He says, so he was in one family, I was in another family. How did we come together? By Krishna's arrangement, he says. Who knew that I will come to his protection? Who knew that I would come in America? Who knew that you American boys will come to me? So there's a series of meetings that he came into contact with his spiritual master, that from his impulse he came to America. Now he said, you American boys, you're with me. These are all Krishna's arrangements. He says, we cannot understand how things are taking place. To us it may look like chance, or, but here's it is Krishna's plan. In 1936, today is 9 December 1968. That means 32 years ago. In Bombay, I was then doing some business. So, as you may know, that Prabhupada had become a disciple of his spiritual master, but he wasn't a renunciate living in an ashram. Rather, he was a married person, and he had a pharmaceutical business. He says chemist. In America, in English, chemist means like a scientist who works in a laboratory. But in England, chemist means apothec, pharmacist who sells like a drugstore. So he was that kind of chemist. So he was doing some business in Bombay. You have to think of this, 1936. What it's like to do business in Bombay now. Imagine 1936. So in Bombay, I was then doing some business. All of a sudden, perhaps on this day, sometime between 9 or 10 December, at that time, Guru Maharaj was indisposed a little. And he was staying at Jagannath Puri on the seashore. So Guru Maharaj, he's referring to his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And when he says indisposed, it's a way of saying he's sick. It's an old-fashioned word, indisposed. You don't hear people say it anymore. So that he was indisposed a little. And he was staying at Jagannath Puri on the seashore. When people get sick, it's one place they go to recover. Is Puri. The sea breezes and the water is very healthy. So a lot of people go there for convalescence, recovery from disease. So that's where he was. So I wrote him a letter. He's saying, all of a sudden, I wrote him a letter. My dear master, your other disciples, brahmachari, sannyasis, they are rendering you direct service. I am a householder. I cannot live with you, that is to say, in your ashram. I cannot serve you nicely, so I do not know. How can I serve you? So this way Prabhupada summarizes the content of his letter. He's feeling discontent. The Gaudiya Math, Bhaktisiddhanta had expanded into about 60-some, starting with nothing really, or very little, had 64 branches all over India. And it sent some missionaries to London. Although they didn't succeed, they never opened a branch in Europe, but he'd sent them a few years before this letter. So he had, and his temples, his institutions, the mat they call them, was all renunciates, celibate men, brahmacharis, sannyasis, and those who were married, they lived outside, and mostly they were counted on to contribute some money, but not much else. So Prabhupada was himself he was initiated, but he had a family to support, and so he was doing business and chanting Hare Krishna and trying to do some service. He used to donate money, quite a bit. But he was thinking, I'm not doing so much. All my other God brothers, they're working so hard, they're preaching and serving. What am I doing? So he's feeling discontent. So he wrote this letter to his spiritual master on an impulse, he says, all of a sudden, he says. So he says, so I do not know how can I serve you. Simply an idea, I was thinking of serving him. I cannot serve you nicely. How can I serve him seriously? So that was the letter he wrote. The reply was dated 13 December 1936. That's pretty fast. Nayotei writes the letter, gets a reply back on the 13th. Not only did Bhaktisiddhanta answer quickly, but the mail service must be quite good in those days. Anyway. So now he tells, in that letter he wrote, my dear such and such, I'm very glad to receive your letter. I think you should try to push our movement in English. End of quote. That was his writing. Quote, and that will do good to you and to the people who will help you. That was his instruction. Push this movement in English. Now, everybody understood what that meant in the Gaudiya Math. That means preach in the West. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was very eager to send this movement to the West, and he had tried. He sent a couple of sannyasis to London, Ban Maharaj and I think one other sannyasi went to England, and they had Bhaktisiddhanta had a book written in English. One of his disciples was a Professor Sanyal, who was very good in English, and Bhaktisiddhanta worked together with him very closely to have an English language book. It was called Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It was the life and teachings of Chaitanya. And the first volume was published in 1933 by the Gaudiya Math. And as soon as it was published, the people went to England with this book, this English language book, telling the whole history of the Vaishnavism and what is Vaishnavism and who are the Acharyas and who was Chaitanya and so on. It was supposed to be a 3-volume work. The second volume was only published until in the 90s. The third was never written. So with that book, he sent these preachers to London. But they weren't very successful. They went around, they toured. At that time, people were very interested in Indian thinking and spiritual philosophy from India, so they gave big lectures. They came to Berlin. There's a picture of Ban Maharaj with Himmler and Goebbels and all these people. They met the celebrities, and they also did some preaching in Stockholm, and so they got some attention, but they didn't make any disciples, and they couldn't stay there. They came back, so here Bhaktisiddhanta considered that attempt a failure, and therefore he's wanting Prabhupada, please push our movement in English. That was his writing, and that will do good to you and the people who will help you. That was his instruction. Then in 1936, the same year, on 31st December, that means just after writing this letter, a fortnight before his departure, he passed away. So that was the last he heard from his spiritual master, was this letter saying, I should preach in English, which means go to the West. But I took that order of my spiritual master very seriously. But I did not think that I'll have to do such and such a thing. I was at that time a householder. So in other words, you have to understand, this order to preach in the West, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave to many of his disciples. But they were all sannyasis. Sannyasi, renounce means you have no attachments, you have no entanglements. You can go. You're fit, you can travel. You can pick up and leave. You have all your possessions in one little bag and you go. So Prabhupada is astonished to receive this order to go to the West because he's married, he's doing business, he's got a family to support. And somehow, so he said, I did not think that I'd have to do such and such a thing. He could not make plans. How, sitting here in 1936 doing business in Bombay, am I going to think of going to the West? So it's a very astonishing instruction to get. And he said, my godbrothers who are sannyasis, they're serving you nicely. I'm a householder, I can't serve you. And then he gives him the same order he gave to his leading sannyasis to go to the West. They all knew this, that they were supposed to do this, but nothing was happening. It wasn't the one people returned in failure. Although they made big propaganda, we were a big success, nobody went back. And there were no disciples, anything like that. Maybe one or two. So he says, I took the order of my spiritual master very seriously. This is his last thing he tells me. He wants me to do it. I should take it seriously. But I couldn't imagine, how do I get from here to there? I was a householder. Then he said, but this is the arrangement of Krishna. Remember, he's already talked a little bit about the arrangement of Krishna, how I came together with you American boys, how I met my spiritual master. These are Krishna's arrangement. So again he says, this is the arrangement of Krishna. And then he says, if we strictly try to serve the spiritual master, his order, then Krishna will give us all facilities. That is the secret. So now Prabhupada will explain the secret. If we serve the spiritual master, then Krishna will make it possible. That is the secret. And then he says, although there was no possibility, I never thought, in other words, referring to his puzzlement, how can I do this? When he first got the order, it looked like Mission Impossible. We used to have this television program in America everybody watched when I was a kid called Mission Impossible. Every week there was another impossible mission that these guys had to do. So here he said there was no possibility. He's giving me an impossible order. I never thought, in other words, how I would be able to do this. But still, I took it a little seriously by studying a commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on the Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, the verse, Vyavasa Atmika Buddhir Ekeha Kurunandana. This is 241. You may know this verse. Krishna tells what you need to succeed in spiritual life. And he calls it Vyavasa Atmika Buddhir. buddhi means intelligence. It's the faculty with which we fix our determination and attention. It's called buddhi. And vyavasika atmika means that this determination is resolute. Prabhupada says, those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, their aim is one. The intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. In other words, if you want to be successful in spiritual life, you have to be very fixed and determined. Those who are resolute, their intelligence is bahu shaka, many-branched. Like they have many interests. Like if you want to be successful in spiritual life, or say in Krishna consciousness, that has to be the main thing in our life. We can do other things, but the other things that we do, they serve the main purpose. Today you see people are their religion, they have a religion, but their religion is one thing added on to their life. They have their job, they go to work, they have their family and their friends, their social life, that's another thing. Maybe some sport they're into, that's another thing in their life. And maybe they have some political interest. That's another thing in their life. And then here, there's their religion. They do that on Sunday. So it's like their religion is just like another thing, like a hobby that they do. It's one thing among many. So if our spiritual life is like that, then we will not be successful. To be successful, it has to be the main thing. We have to be fixed. Their aim is one. So he's telling about Vishnu, this verse is telling about that. So Prabhupada read this commentary on the verse, where Vishnu Chakravarti says, in connection with that verse, Vishnu Chakravarti gives his commentary that we should take up the words of the spiritual master as our life and soul. We should try to carry out the instruction, the specific instruction of the spiritual master very rigidly without caring for our personal benefit or loss. Now you'll find out, if you look through all the writings and lectures of Srila Prabhupada, he actually refers to this verse and this commentary again and again and again and again. So here he's telling, this was the thing, he got this order from his spiritual master, he knew it was important, it was his last order, it looked like mission impossible, but then from reading this commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti, he decided, I must take it very seriously. I must commit myself to this order. He gave me this instruction, and so I must dedicate my life to that instruction. How? Well, I'll just do it. So Prabhupada did like this. He began, for example, this is 1936, that he got this order, really the beginning of 37, and he began to meditate on it. He began writing in English. Of course, he had some education in Scottish Churches College, a college run by people from Scotland, really, Presbyterian ministers and so on. So he knew some English, but he wanted to now become more fluent, and so he started writing, and then he started publishing in English. He started in 1944, he began, which is the year I was born, he began Back to Godhead magazine. And at first he was just distributing it by writing it and publishing it and distributing by hand to whoever in Calcutta or wherever who spoke English, because the educated class of people in India, they speak English. It's a little strange English. It's different English, but it's English. And so he began to do like this. So Prabhupada says here, I tried a little bit in that spirit. So he has given me all facility to serve him. That is his spiritual master. He says he just tried. He did the best he could. And you can see, if you look at Prabhupada's effort, he starts with Back to Godhead magazine. He tries to preach Krishna consciousness. He uses whatever money he has for preaching. His family becomes somewhat alienated from him in this effort. His wife did not appreciate it very much, his dedication to Krishna consciousness. He took care of his family, he supported them, and everything like that, but there wasn't a lot of help. And then at a certain point, he started an organization called the League of Devotees. I think Prabhupada's idea was, first of all, actually he tried to serve somewhat with the Gaudiya Math. The different institutions that started by his spiritual master. And he found out that there was not much interest in preaching. When he wanted to publish things and to write things and to go out and preach, people didn't want to help out very much. He was very disappointed in that regard. And he thought that this spirit of Bhakti Siddhanta, to give Krishna consciousness to others, was missing. People had gotten temples, they got a little security, they had got donors giving them money. And I think maybe in India, the main thing in people's life is to get a secure position. I've seen that, the real talent in India is once you get a position, nobody can get rid of you. You stay in there like anything. So this was, sometimes I read newspaper articles where somebody is a tenant in a house and the government wants to destroy the house and they're in court for 40 years trying to get the tenant out. Somehow they can stay, It's like a real talent. Anyway, for whatever reason, there was not much interest in preaching, and so Prabhupada was disappointed in that. So he also started an organization called the League of Devotees, and got in Jhansi a little bit of a building that he rented, and started to try to get some basis of people that was, as a basis to go to the West. And that fell apart. There was some politics and so on. That didn't work out so well. But he was learning. So then Prabhupada finally went to Vrindavan. He left his family life. He always sent them money and cared for his wife and so on. But he tells the story that he was always so interested in Krishna consciousness, and his wife was frustrated with it, that she wanted some money to buy what he calls tea biscuits for having tea, some little cookies or things that we call cookies in America. In England they call them biscuits. And he didn't have the money, and so she took his Bhagavatams and sold them and bought money for tea biscuits, and that was the last straw for him. Anyway, that's the story. He went to Vrindavan and then began to thinking of going to the West, that he had to have some book, just like Bhakti Siddhanta. He began translating all by himself Srimad Bhagavatam into English. And he worked like this. translating it into English. I mean, it's quite a story. He was quite by himself. He had not only did the translating sitting on an old typewriter, typing out page after page of translation of Bhagavatam, but then he had to raise money to get it printed. He had to go to the paper markets and buy the paper and get the binding and publish it himself, and he did that. 3 volumes. They started coming out, in 1962, I think the first volume was published. So he would have some books. And when he came to America, he had a trunk full of these Bhagavatams. And so he did this, so he took sannyas eventually, and did this all by himself. Then he came to America. You have to understand, when he left, he was 69 years old. He had his 70th birthday on the ship. How did he get on a ship? Well, a lady who had a line of cargo ships, gave him passage on one of them, the Scindia steamship line. So he had free passage because he had no money. And so he came to America, arrived in 1965 in the United States. He was 70 years old. On the way over, he had some heart attacks. Nobody was helping him. He had no institutional support. The amount of money, at that time, India had currency restrictions. They only allowed you to take out 40 rupees. That was the equivalent of $7 American. When he got to America, no bank would convert it. They wouldn't accept the rupees. So he sold one set of books to the captain of the Jaladuta, the ship he was on, for $20 or $25. So if you look, when Prabhupada came, he was 70 years old. He didn't have youthful energy. He had a heart attack. He didn't have good health. He had no institutional support. He had no money. And he showed up in the West, all by himself. And then something happened. A very strange thing happened, really, from everyone's thought. Prabhupada thought actually that this Bhagavatam is a very elevated cultural presentation, and his expectation was the same as actually in the general Gaudiya Mata, that people who are very intellectual and thoughtful will take this up. So Prabhupada eventually found himself, he went to New York City after a short visit to Western Pennsylvania. He went to New York City and was living hand to mouth, talking at some yoga center. There are very few of those in those days. And gradually some people began to become attracted to him, and they were the people that later on were called hippies. The counterculture of the 60s was just starting, and those people who were attracted to Srila Prabhupada, the young people, and they were not the kind of people that Prabhupada was thinking of. And if you go through his work and find his descriptions of hippies, it is not very flattering. Unemployed, lazy, drug addicted, lying in the streets, not taking a bath, so on. It was not very nice. And later on he wrote to the American ambassador to India, he says, "I have taken hippies and turned them into happies." Which is the way of saying he took people who were in the mode of ignorance and brought them to the mode of goodness. So that became the people that gathered around him were people from the counterculture of the 60s. They're very attracted to Srila Prabhupada for some reason. You sit down in the Lower East Side and then anyway, it's you may know the story. And there was what people call the Hare Krishna explosion. Suddenly, very quickly, it became quite a phenomenon. So Prabhupada said, I tried a little bit in that spirit, so he has given me all facility to serve him. He came to America without any assets and with a group of disciples that were dropped out from everything. And yet, somehow or other, so he says in 1968, so things have come to this stage that in this old age I have come to your country. He says. Sometimes Prabhupada is so humble. He said, when I was a young man, my spiritual master told me to preach in the West, but I was so foolish that not foolish, but I could not do anything until my old age. So that in this old age I have come to your country. He said, I'm so much of a rascal that I could not do anything until my old age. I've come to your country, and you are also taking this movement seriously, trying to understand it. We have got some books now. So they started, his books were reprinted in America, and we kept starting to publish Bhagavad Gita and so on. So there is a little foothold of this movement. So really, it was a small crowd in Los Angeles at that time. So on this occasion of my spiritual master's departure, as I am trying to execute his will, that is his order, similarly, I shall also request you to execute the same order through my will. So here Prabhupada gives the order, the same order that he received. He's now passing it on. He does it right here in this sentence. So on this occasion of my spiritual master's departure, as I am trying to execute his will, similarly, I shall also request you to execute the same order through my will. Now we'll see, he has to restate the order a little bit, because it doesn't mean to preach in English exactly. We'll see what the basis of it is. And then he says, I am an old man. I can also pass away at any moment. That is nature's law. Because by then he was like 78 years old. Prabhupada really didn't have very long. He started in the West at 70, 82 he passed away. Not long. By the way, as Prabhupada disciple, I'm now 65. I have a card in America that says senior citizen. I can travel on my city from the trains for free, I'm a senior citizen. We're also thinking, the time will come when there won't be anybody who knew Prabhupada directly on this planet. We have to also make things go on. So he says, I am an old man. I can also pass away at any moment. That is nature's law. Nobody can check it. So that is not very astonishing. But my appeal to you on this auspicious day of the departure of my Guru Maharaj, that at least to some extent you have understood the essence of Krishna consciousness movement. In 68, nobody was a disciple for very long. But you've understood, you've grasped something essential about it. You should try to push it on, he says. You should, in other words, two parts, understand it yourself and give it to others. People are suffering from want of this consciousness. As we daily pray about devotees, Vanchakalpatrubhyascha Kripasindubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. That's it. I offer my respectful obeisance to all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, They can fulfill the desires of everyone, just like desire trees, and they are full of compassion for the fallen souls. So this is Kripa Sindhu. They are like oceans of mercy, patitanam bhavaneva. They are compassionate. And then he says, a Vaishnava, or devotee of Lord, his life is dedicated for the benefit of the people. And then he mentions how Jesus Christ sacrificed himself. This is the determination of the devotees of the Lord. They don't care for personal comforts because they love Krishna or God, therefore they love all living entities. Because all living entities are in relationship with Krishna. So similarly, you should learn. This Krishna consciousness movement means to become Vaishnava and feel for suffering humanity. Now notice here he got this idea from Bhaktisiddhanta. Think of 1936. So Prabhupada's in India. India is an impoverished colony. And Bhaktisiddhanta wants to send people to the advanced, rich, and prosperous Europe, where they have so much. And he's thinking they're suffering. People in Europe are thinking, oh, the poor people in India, they're hungry, they're suffering, we have to help them. But in India, Bhaktisiddhanta, oh, these poor Europeans, they don't have Krishna consciousness. We have to help them. And you may say, oh, how was Europe suffering? Well, look what happened. This is 1936. What happened 2 or 3 years later? Then Europe really was suffering. So Prabhupada says that you should feel for suffering humanity. And then, I have to make this short now, he says that people see this, why people are suffering, from different angles. So some people say, oh, they're suffering because they don't have food and they want to supply food, or they open hospitals. Because, on the bodily platform, we certainly see that these works are going on, charitably, Médecins Sans Frontières, and all these things, going out and helping everybody. And he said, that's good. But ultimately, why are we suffering? We have to see that people are suffering because of the just identifying with the material body. Because if you really want to end suffering, you have to solve the death problem. You have to solve, don't grow old, don't become diseased, don't die. Who can stop these things? They keep promising in the future, there'll be no disease. In the future, people won't grow old. In the future, nobody will die. Don't believe them, they're lying. So these are the real problems of life. It's described as janma, mrityu, jara, vyadi, dukkha, doshana, darshana. One should see that the real problems are birth, death, old age, and disease. Deal with that. So we'll try to deal with it by this thing or that thing, but we don't deal with the real problem. So that's why Prabhupada sees that this Krishna consciousness is the ultimate welfare work. It gets to the root cause of our suffering, which, according to the Vedas, is that we are eternal spirit souls, but we have falsely identified ourselves with the material body, and therefore whatever happens to this body, we think, oh, this is happening to me. Because our consciousness is covered, we clean up the consciousness, we remove the covering, and we can understand, experience ourselves as an eternal being. And understand that we are not affected by this material body. So Prabhupada ends this talk, he says, one should be very much pessimistic of this materialistic life. Then he can make advancement in spiritual life. Tukalayam Shasvatam, this place is full of miseries. if you study analytically, you'll find simply miserable condition. Therefore, the whole problem is that we should give up our material conditional life, and in Krishna consciousness, we should try to elevate ourselves to the spiritual platform and thereby be promoted to the kingdom of God. So there are descriptions in the Bhagavad Gita. So this Krishna consciousness movement is authorized. Very important. Now you American boys and girls have taken to this movement. Please take it more seriously. That is the mission of Lord Chaitanya and my Guru Maharaj. And we are also trying to execute the will by disciplic succession. You have come forward to help me. I shall request you all that I shall go away, but you shall live. Don't give up pushing on this movement, and you'll be blessed by Lord Chaitanya and His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Goswami Prabhupada, thank you very much. That was his like, I've skipped some of it. But that's the idea. So this order that he gave to Prabhupada, push on this movement in English, really Prabhupada puts it in this general form. You should feel for the suffering of others. And you should not just try to make yourself Krishna consciousness, but you should give it to others. Why? Because they are suffering. And there's a very nice poem by Raghunath Das Goswami where he is thankful to Sanatana Goswami for saving him, and he calls him Paradukha Dukhi, one who suffers when he sees that others are suffering. That a devotee himself who's advanced in Krishna consciousness, he has no reason to suffer. But when he sees that others are suffering, then he suffers. This is called compassion. So he says this is to Krishna consciousness movement means to become a devotee, a Vaishnava, and feel for suffering humanity. And so we can see that Prabhupada did that. He took this order of his spiritual master, he dedicated himself to it, and the movement grew like that. I remember once Prabhupada said fairly early on, he said to his disciple Shamsundar, he says, I'm one person and see what I have done. He said, now we are 500. At that time there must have been 500 initiated disciples. Then he said, each one of you become just like me. And then see what can be accomplished. So that was actually his order, to become just like him. So we should feel, as far as devotees, we are supposed to feel this for other people. We're like people, just like say in some country there's some plague, and people are dying very much from some disease, and somehow or other you have the treatment, or say you have something that if people take this medicine, they won't get the disease, they'll be inoculated against it. So when you go to that country, you should work very hard. Because even if you're not 1 minute, you're not busy, somebody's going to die. So that's it. Prabhupada had that same sense of urgency. That it's like an emergency, that we can save people from their suffering in this material world if we just give them this Krishna consciousness. So that's the spirit of his spiritual master. That's Prabhupada's spirit, and it's the spirit that also he's at least trying to pass on to his followers. And we in turn try to pass on to others. That we should and he gives us the secret that we should have this commitment, that we should do the best we can with whatever we have, and then Krishna will empower us more and more that we can help others. So that's a little introduction to Srila Prabhupada, what his life was really about. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada. Do we have time for any questions or comments? Or?
Yeah, we do like this. Those who are really hungry and they need to go, they can push up. But everyone else, we can go.
That's
on.
also mercy.
Yeah. But if we have some question, we can, of course.
Yeah, sure. I'll just stay here now.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Someone has a question? Or? Otherwise, I have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that we should, Prabhupada said that we should be very pessimistic, like
About this world.
about this world. And
Mhm.
so sometimes I also, in a preaching program, I mentioned some aspect of that. And then in the end, like the listener was saying, I like your food, but your philosophy is horrible. You know? It's like so pessimistic. So how people can understand that? Because it's sometimes hard for them to...
Pessimism is realism. It's realism. I mean, the fact of the matter is that in a very short time, all of us are going to be dead. We say, oh, we've made so much progress, but the mortality rate right now is the same as it was in the Middle Ages. It's 100%. So if you want to be happy, you know, you have to solve the death problem. And I don't think anyone's going to do it. So people are, you know how people become happy in the material world? By making themselves stupid. Really, I mean, you just, there was a, there's a case that can be made actually by Otto Rank, this follower of Sigmund Freud, that human life is built on the denial of death. That death is there, and if we look at it, what you know, we here right now in a very important place. What will it be like in 1,000 years? What will we have accomplished? What will we have done? 10 years. Or 10 years even, yeah. And so people are trying to become like fame. It's an immortality project. If I can just become famous, then I'll be immortal. So these people, they're unnecessarily increasing the pages of history just so they can become famous. So you can read the Napoleon Bonaparte, he was so famous, you know. But mostly it's just something to torture school children with. You have to remember this name. Nobody really cares. If you want to read history, you could just read it as a long chronicle of disasters and mistakes and stupidity. That's what we learn from history. It's like that, you know. So when people are trying one way or another, they want to become happy. Or Sigmund Freud, one book, I don't know what the German title in English is called, Civilization and Its Discontents. And like the first 20 pages, he talks about the prospect for human happiness. And he says, it's zero. He doesn't see it. He was very pessimistic also. And he's not a religious person. He's just trying to be realistic. Although you can say that his own career was another immortality project in his own way. So we have these different things that we try to do. We fall in love. When people fall, our love will last forever. I'll love you to the end of time. Our love will go on. Huh? You know, we go to see these movies, and there's the boy and there's the girl, and they meet, they fall in love, and then there's some obstacles, you know, that they have to overcome, and then they come together again, and they walk off, and the music comes up, and it says, the end, and they live happily ever after. Keep the camera going. Keep it going all along, see what happens, you know. So we have this industry of illusions to make us stupid. People give money because that's also another immortality project, you know. I mean, why is gold so precious? Because it's the immortal metal. It does not rust, it does not decay. It's like spirit. It's incorruptible. And so if I get a lot of gold, then, you know, I also feel like, even, you know why coins are round? Why not another shape? Because a gold coin is the sun. And the silver coin is the moon. And I have the sun and the moon in my pockets. Oh, I'm really something, huh? We do these things to think that somehow or other, if I get enough strength, if I get enough power, if I get enough security, then I'm safe. And so I may have my guard dogs and my advanced security system and my personal bodyguards, and I may have a limousine that has so much armor on it so that I cannot be killed. But somehow or other, no matter what I have, you know, death comes through with a little pin and bores through all the water. Bing! Hits me. How does he get in? So this is what people are doing. These are illusions. These are illusions. All these different kinds of immortality projects or God projects that people have. So we have to give up. I can afford to be pessimistic about this world because I do not depend upon it for the course of my happiness. It's a very, very severe mistake to depend upon the course of events for our happiness. That's why, you know, you can't really be happy because somewhere you know better. You know, deep inside you really know what's going on, and so you have to maintain this illusion. Of course, there's so many things you can do to assist you. One of them is, there's so many drugs and intoxicants and things like that. You can get absorbed in just taking drugs, and then you lose your consciousness. Or you get all excited about some football team. That's another way, you know. Or you can watch television all the time. All kind of things. So we don't think about our state. So if we really have some engage in a spiritual program, and actually not so much advancement to at least get some sense of that my spiritual existence, that I'm not this body, and we can go. Our happiness does not depend upon the course of material nature. Then we become detached, and then you can be as pessimistic about the world as you want to, and you're not depressed. Maybe we can be depressed about other people, but really, you can afford it. You can be pessimistic. It's okay, and you're still happy. Okay.
Yes, Prabhupada mentioned that then you can be spiritual optimistic.
Yes, spiritually we're very optimistic. And I'd be even more optimistic if more and more people take to Krishna consciousness in some form or another. Because as human beings we have this capacity for spiritual realization. But then we don't get anything more out of our lives much than a cat or a dog. And we die just like a cat or a dog dies, completely baffled as to what's going on. This is a great loss. It's a shame when that happens. Okay? Anything else? Yeah?
I was wondering, how can we develop more this vision of Paraduki?
How can we develop more? Well, he wants to know how we can, this Paraduki, how we should feel for suffering humanity. One thing is if we make our own, first he says you become Vaishnava and you have some feeling for suffering humanity. So so to become Vaishnava means I have to serve a Vaishnava. So even if I don't have so much feeling, I serve somebody who does, and therefore I act as though I have feeling. And in the beginning, that may be the best I can do. But because in the very beginning of spiritual life, we're worried about ourselves. And maybe we're not so secure in our spiritual life, but we get a little bit of security. And we can see that spiritual life is not a fairy tale, that it's real. And then naturally we start to feel for suffering humanity. As Prabhupada said in this talk, that one develops love for Krishna, and then that love expands to include everything and everyone. Because Krishna is not just one being among many. He's the supreme being, but he's also the root of all other beings. And so when there's love for Krishna, it's like the example is given of pouring water on the root of a tree. When you pour water on the root of the tree, the whole tree becomes nourished. When I give food to the stomach may be the enjoyer of the food, but the hand is nourished also. So similarly, when we repose our love on Krishna, it will expand. At first it looks maybe you're cutting things off, you know. But Krishna is unique. He's an individual, but he's the universal individual. And so everyone becomes included. So that will happen as a matter of course. I remember when I was a devotee and I was still attached to material life, a new devotee, I mean, and I still had some attachment to my past material life. Sometimes I'd see people out partying and enjoying, and I would envy them. I thought I was still attached. So then it was hard to feel compassion for them because I was thinking, I want to do like they do. But then as my taste for Krishna consciousness increased, now I see people that they look like they're enjoying, but I can see through it. I can see that actually they're actually not. It's just a kind of a pretense. If I make enough noise in the party, then I can convince everybody else and myself that I'm having a good time. Because people's enjoyment, usually, unless they're children, it has this very kind of obsessive-driven quality to it. There's some anxiety behind it. You can see that anxiety. So that will naturally develop. But meanwhile, at least I'm serving Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada has that feeling. He says, you should have some feeling. You should do this. Just like Prabhupada did to Bhakti Siddhanta. That you should go to the West. And then Prabhupada understood that meant you should have some feeling for suffering humanity. So you may do it at first just because you're instructed to do so. But then, and sometimes Krishna consciousness works that way. I may not be humble, for example. But if I bow down enough times, I'll start to feel humble. It's just a practical principle. At first I have to concentrate my mind on Krishna by some mechanical means. I'm chanting Hare Krishna, my mind wanders, I bring it back. But just by that effort, I'll start to concentrate on Krishna, and then I'll start to have some feeling, and I'll concentrate on Krishna because actually I'm more interested in Krishna than in anything else. So it begins like this, by practice. And if we practice a certain way, then the feelings will also come. That's a pragmatic principle. Okay, now probably everyone's really hungry. We stop now. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada.